Hi, everybody. Well, it's quite a day. I got to tell you, I had the most extraordinary dream, and I'm trying to come out right now. I'm trying to come out right now of how the dream affected me, and I got to tell you that it was just weird. It was one of those. Do you ever have a panic dream? Do you ever have a total panic dream when you're like you got an audition or you got a job interview, you've got something like that, right? And everything goes wrong. Like everything goes wrong. And in this dream that I had, I woke up in a complete panic. All my equipment had failed. Someone had come in and changed everything around. The computer was broken. It was like, oh my God. I got into a complete I woke up and I thought it was real. I thought it was real. Welcome along. This is a very special show. This is continuing the idea that I came up with, and I want to explain why I did. And thank you for joining us. And if you're watching on Catch Up on the YouTube channel, thank you again for your support. If you're there, please press the subscribe button. And that would be absolutely marvelous. And press the like, because it just helps us, right? So I woke up to find, thank heavens, the equipment wasn't smashed to pieces. Everything hadn't been destroyed, and I hadn't been sabotaged, which is great. I can just do that myself. It was some weeks ago that I thought about dedicating 3 shows to the subject of dementia and the subject of Alzheimer's. And I have very personal reasons for wanting to do that. First of all, I think it's a very important subject. 2, it doesn't get much coverage because it's not sexy. There's no upside to it. You don't get, what can I say? You don't get, loads of celebrities talking about it. And if they do, it's all very, very sad. And so I wanted to try and redress the balance. And what is the point of having radio if you can't do that? And my reason for wanting to do it is that my mum had Alzheimer's for 16 years. 16. And often they say, and I'm not an expert, but you get into a tiz, and so you ask the doctors, well, what's the prognosis? Oh, 4 years, 5 years max. And you go, okay, I can prepare myself. I can brace myself for that. 16 years later, 16 years. It was really, really, it was devastating. And on a personal level, of course, it was absolutely shocking, heartbreaking to watch my mom go from being a wonderful hostess, witty, sarcastic, funny, elegant, to the person that she became. Even talking about it now, I get very upset. And we go into denial, don't we? That's what we do. We go into denial. And yeah, oh dear, that's very strange. Stephen Marsh, has something gone wrong with today's broadcast? Can't tune in. Well, I don't understand why. We have not got you on Facebook. No, I've been blocked. I've been suspended by Facebook. That's why you're not getting me on Facebook. Unbelievable. I have been suspended for a joke. You can't believe it, but it's true. You're going to have to tune in to the website, which is www.mensradiostation.com. You won't get me on my Facebook. It is quite extraordinary. You should be able to get it on MRS. You can get it on my LinkedIn page. You can get it on the YouTube channel. But you won't be able to get it on my Facebook page because they will not allow it to go out. Unbelievable. It was a joke about a parked car. Of all the things to talk about, it was a joke about a parked car that I made to a friend of mine, and apparently it broke their regulations. So just unbelievable. So there we are. It's infuriating. It's upsetting. I will, of course, complain. Veronica Curran up in Edinburgh. Thank you very, very much. She's going to put it up on Facebook. I appreciate that. Stephen Marsh, you could do exactly the same thing. I will be, of course, lodging an official complaint because they are stopping the progress of us talking about mental health and well-being. It is quite extraordinary. So, there we are. So, are you go to the YouTube, LinkedIn? Yep, there we go. There you're saying. Are you tuned in, Kimmy? Is it just me who can't see it? No. It is Facebook. Unfortunately, they have blocked certain things. There's absolutely nothing I can do with it. It is one of the most important weeks with dementia. It's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. But there we are. I'll lodge a formal complaint, and probably you can all chime in as well. Let's get back to dementia. You may not be able to see it, but you can always hear us. You can always hear us. Now, getting back to my mum, it starts with the little things. And you put it down. I can see my first guest in the digital green room. It's going to be very, very interesting conversation. But as I said, it starts with the little things. And the little things are that she became forgetful. And you think, well, she's getting on a little bit. It's forgetful. And that forgetfulness, you make every excuse because you don't want to accept what's going on. You don't want to process that. You make every excuse under the sun. Oh, it's not this, it's not that, it's certainly not dementia. Oh, it's not Alzheimer's. She's just getting a little bit forgetful there. Well, it just got worse and worse and worse. It was horrible. And eventually, for her own safety, I had no alternative but to find a nursing home that could look after her 24/7, because she was up to that point completely self-sufficient, elegant, wonderful, and all those other things. But she was a danger. I went in one day, she'd gone away, and I went in to check that her home was okay, and she'd left the hairdryer on. It was red hot. It had been on probably at that point for well over 24 hours, possibly 48 hours, if I hadn't gone in and checked that hairdryer and checked the flat. The whole place could have burnt down. She kept losing the car. And eventually I said, Mum, you got to stop driving. But she kept parking and then insisting someone had stolen the car. Well, of course, she'd parked it somewhere weird. Couldn't remember where she'd parked it. And this went on and on, and then became crazy with the post. Paul Claridge, what's happened to the Facebook broadcast? I have been blocked, Paul Claridge. That is what's happened. I made a joke yesterday with a mutual friend about people blocking her in, and I'm not joking. And they have blocked live broadcasts. I can still make posts, but I can't do live broadcasts. So you're going to have to find us on YouTube. You can find us, of course, on Men's Radio Station website as well, www.mensradiostation.com. It is infuriating, it is unfair, and it's absolutely shocking. Anyway, that was really why I wanted to dedicate a week to looking at dementia. So many of you have contacted me. I mean, like crazy numbers, saying, oh God, we want to talk about this. We're suffering with this as well. This is so difficult. It is difficult. It's emotionally like watching someone drown. And very often they become somebody so different. Ultimately, my mum didn't know me probably for the last 2 years, had no idea who I was, invented members of the family who were non-existent, and I had to keep talking to the wonderful staff at the care homes that no, I don't have a sister. please don't think there's a member of the family who doesn't care. I've never had a sister. There's nobody, there is just me. I was lucky. I had a wonderful partner who was very supportive and a fantastic daughter who was brilliant as well. But it's very, very, very hard. Veronica Curran up in Edinburgh says, I watch lifelong family friend and hubby go to vascular dementia and Alzheimer's. We all help the family stay on top of it with carers. That is without even looking at the financial aspect. The emotional aspect is exhausting, upsetting. I'd be honest with you. I'd come out of the care home, sit in my car and cry. That's what I would do. Not every time, but it was tough. It was tough. The financial aspect, that's a whole different ball of wax, because care homes, if that's what's necessary, or you've got to have round the clock care. I want to bring in both of my very, very special guests today. They are both experts, and I appreciate them finding the time to bring us in. So let's just add Jules Knight, and let's add Paul Edwards. Paul, Jules, welcome. Let's just unmute you. There we are. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
All right, lovely. And Paul, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you really well.
We can hear you too. Let's start. Am I allowed to say ladies first? I'm going to anyway. Jules, tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, very nice to be here today. I apologise, I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm hoping my...
don't come too near the mic in case it comes through the screen.
It's not the COVID. Don't worry, I've done my test this morning, so I'm safe with that. I'm Jules. I'm a consultant Admiral nurse working for Dementia UK. I've worked as an Admiral nurse for over 20 years now, and essentially we support families affected by dementia. So I've done that in various different settings. At the moment, as I say, I work for Dementia UK, and my focus is on young onset dementia and supporting the development of new young onset services across the UK. And I see you've got me as a doctor there, but I'm not quite a doctor.
That was the information. That was the absolute information that I was given. Maybe you've been promoted.
And that's good to hear.
Well, look me down. Right, I'm getting rid of that. Let's do that. Okay.
Fabulous.
I'm taking out doctor. Hang on. Right, I'm so sorry, but that was the information.
Oh no, that's no problem.
There we are. Now you're just Jules Knight.
That's
1 minute fine. A doctor, the next minute just an ordinary civilian like you and like everybody else. Okay, so I'll come on to you in a second, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us, because I know I've been reaching out to you for some time over months. I'm grateful that you could both make it. What you said, young onset dementia. Could you? Because that's something that we don't often talk about. Could we discuss that just a little bit? Give us an idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's not something that's really well known about, but essentially, it's people experiencing dementia symptoms before the age of 65. That's a really easy definition.
Okay.
So it's younger people.
We're not talking. I'm not being facetious in the least. It's not an area of expertise. You are the experts. I'm just a conduit. So. It's not like teenagers, God forbid, or something like that.
You can get dementia in children. It's very, very unusual, and is usually genetic in origin, but very, very unusual. I've only ever come across one family in over my 20 years experience as an Admiral nurse. So very, very rare, but it can happen. Usually you would see people in their 40s and 50s. It's very common in that age group.
It's a terrible thing, Jules, but I remember, obviously, I was at the mum's various care homes all the time because it was just me. And I remember seeing somebody who was clearly much younger than me, and I could see the daughters, and I presumed they were all visiting a grandmother. And it was so sad that the two daughters were visiting this young woman who had dementia. I should never have made an assumption, but B, it really tugged at your heartstrings there, because she was no more than early 40s. So it's a shocker. Let's introduce. No, I hope I've got the correct thing, because I'm going to have to edit otherwise. Dr. Paul Edwards, Director of Clinical Services at Dementia UK. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're like the busiest man on the planet. So that's well, he is. Are we talking Go on.
Sorry, I'm probably the busiest non-doctor on the planet as well.
Oh, you're not a doctor either.
But it's very flattering. But
You see, what happens is you get one person and you give one person a job and you say, would you be so kind as to do full research? And they go, yeah. And that is what happens. As my mum used to say, joking aside, if you want something done, do it yourself. It's not the truth. It's the truth, isn't it? Every time you delegate, every time. Now, Paul, do we talk enough about dementia?
No, is the short answer. The long answer is there are lots of reasons why we don't. We certainly don't talk about it for those people diagnosed under the age of 65. I think it'll be a surprise to many people that actually there are about, I don't know, over 40,000 people diagnosed under the age of 65 with
Good Lord.
dementia. So it's a significant issue for quite a lot of people in their young to middle age. But of course, because the majority of people with dementia are over the age of 65, and there's, we have about 800,000 people over the age of 65 living with dementia. I think there's a few things that holds us back from talking about it. One is fear. It's very scary, and as you were talking about it, and as I know my own family, it's very difficult to cope with. It's very emotional experience, as well as all of the impacts that it has on other aspects of people's lives. So we don't really want to go there to talk about it. It's also, I guess, something without a cure, right? So there's no fix, there's no tablet, there's no kind of treatment really that is going to take the problems associated with dementia, either changes in the brain, away, because dementia is usually progressive. So of course, some people run away from that and try and sort of distance themselves from that and don't worry about it until it will happen, kind of thing. So I think we don't talk about it enough. I think sometimes also when I know from my own family, but working with other families, there's a bit of a sense of shame and a bit of a sense of stigma that goes around the phrase dementia. And I think, and very often we see when people are sort of newly diagnosed, people tell me, you really get to know who your friends are, because those people who are, really worried about dementia and all the rest of it, they tend to stay away at the very time that you need your friends to be around.
Paul, I could not agree with you more. The phrase I heard the most when, I'll be honest, when I needed the support, we'd like to remember her as she was. And I'd say, yeah, so would I, but I don't have that luxury. I didn't blame them and I wasn't angry. But you do, when you need that help, feel terribly alone. And I don't blame the people, by the way. I'm not being critical of them. I get it. They don't want to see it. It's not pretty. But for those who are close, I'm an only child. It's my mom. So what do? You've got to be there.
You're absolutely right. You do have to be there for your relatives. It's so important to support them. But it's also really important that you get the help and support that you need to do that. And that's one of the reasons why Dementia UK and Admiral Nurses, our charity, was set up many years ago to develop the role of the Admiral Nurse so that we can support families who are affected by dementia. And I guess one of the important things to mention is that we have a helpline, and hopefully you'll have the details of that on your website. I can certainly give you the number for it now.
Oh, hang on. Hold your horses there. I'm going to put it straight up. Go on.
So it's 0800 888.
Hang on. 888. Yep.
6678. And our helpline's open 7 days a week. So Monday to Friday, it's roughly 9 till 9. And then at the weekends, 9 till 5.
It's like magic.
Thank you. That's fantastic.
So wherever you're listening, it's 0800 888 6678. That is the helpline, open all the time to Admiral Nurses. 0800 888 6678. I'll leave that number up there just a little bit longer.
Thank you. I think some of the real issues that we hear is that families don't actually know where they can get support from.
Absolutely.
And particularly post-diagnostically, they get a diagnosis and then they feel that they've been dropped, if you like, and they don't then know where to turn to. Ideally, we'd have Aboriginal nurses everywhere in the UK, and that's our aim, isn't it, Paul? We don't at the moment, but we do have the helpline, so people are able to reach out for support. So please do call the helpline, and I would say if you don't get through, do leave a message, because we definitely get back to you.
And it's all confidential, of course.
Absolutely, the helpline is actually fully run by specialist dementia nurses. I think that makes us quite unique. So you will speak to a qualified dementia nurse.
What are the first signs? Now, this is a wide question because I was in denial. My family was in denial. What are the first sort of signs, generally speaking, that you should look for?
I think most people tend to associate the memory problems with dementia, but there are other things and other changes that you see. So you can see changes in people's ability to think in the way that they had previously. Their communication might change. They might have word finding difficulties. They might change common words that they would usually understand, for instead of say, pass me the salt and pepper, or pass me the thing over there, the thing. And you kind of fall in with it, and you know, you don't necessarily notice it at first. Obviously, people's memories can be affected, and usually it's not memories from years ago. It's usually the memories associated kind of with the here and now. So they might not remember what they had for lunch, for example, or they might not remember that you visited earlier in the day. So things like that can be examples of where there might be dementia and cognitive problems. And sometimes there can be changes in personality. So somebody could be, for example, normally a very extrovert person who gets quite introvert, or vice versa. So you know, noticeable changes really. Sometimes behaviour changes, and sometimes also people's mood. So they might actually get quite depressed, which is not uncommon actually, particularly around the times of diagnosis. So it's just being aware of some of those subtle changes as a family, as a friend, and supporting that person perhaps to go to the GP, or at least start those initial discussions that you're concerned that things have changed. Not always easy though.
Now, Paul, my mum, it's so interesting what you just said, Jules, because my mum had a complete personality change. She went from being funny, sarcastic, witty, to aggressive, you know, quite nasty. I would apologize to people. And she reinvented her entire life story. None of it was true. And I used to say, and I just want to know, you're the experts, if this was common. I used to say, if she'd invented that she was the Queen of France and was happy, I could have lived with that. But she created such a three-dimensional world, none of which was real or true of her history. And it was all horrible. And that was so upsetting to witness, you know? Horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things that go on. It depends where some of the problems in the brain are being affected as to how people talk, think, express themselves, and sometimes also within people's own memories, when they start to be impacted by whatever form of dementia, then that can get jumbled up, disconnected. And I think there's a few things. The first thing to say is that sometimes, and for a lot of people with dementia, this is true, they live in the moment, right? So when you can't totally understand the past, and your brain isn't working enough to update you to think about the future, what you've got is the now. And sometimes that now can be fine. So if your mum was the queen and having an amazing time, and not distressed or upset or things like that, then that moment is that moment. But similarly, for some people, whether they're drawing on past memories, or whether there's kind of all sorts of other things that are going on, and misplaced words and misconnected things, or things that they've just literally read a word in the newspaper and put that together in the wrong way, sometimes those things can be quite distressing. And of course that that can be distressing for the person, but it's also very distressing for the loved one, so the family and the carer, and knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And in the moment, when those kind of difficult emotions are coming through, it's about reassurance, it's about providing comfort, it's about trying to support people to feel as relaxed as they can, because the brain doesn't know. The brain is just carrying on doing whatever it's carrying on, albeit not working in the usual way. So until the brain and the person is allowed to kind of relax back from some of that, then we see distress behaviours happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that we need to try and avoid, though, is trying to brutally bring people back to our own reality, which may not make any sense whatsoever to the person.
That's so interesting.
Because that's even more frightening in a way. Because
Yeah.
so for example, my mum has dementia. She lives in a care home, so not
I'm
dissimilar
sorry.
to some of your experience. And I saw her on Monday, and I told her it was my 50th birthday a few weeks ago, and she said, "That's amazing." She said, "I'm 46," and she was delighted about that. And but because her brain can't do that, it can't do the recognition of that sort of stuff. It would be totally wrong of me to say, "Well, Mum, you're nearly 80." That it just doesn't make sense to do that in the moment, because one, she wouldn't believe it if she's very fixed on that view. So I think it's about supporting life in the moment when you're working with people with dementia who have this disconnected view of the world.
What I used to have to do, and I don't know if this was the right thing or the wrong thing, because I didn't have access. I wish I'd have known you guys. Believe me, I would have been on the phone and, leaning on you heavily. But here's the thing. I used to kind of have to put myself into a different mindset, because as you said, if I try to correct her or bring in the reality, it was an exercise in futility. And I didn't want her to be upset. I just wanted her to be as calm and as happy as as possible. So it was hard, but it's very difficult as just as an ordinary human being not to say, no, there isn't a sister. No, your father wasn't this, that, and the other. And it's hard, isn't it? Very difficult to deal with it.
I think it's really hard, and certainly when you find yourself in the position of being a carer to a relative that you deeply love, it's really hard. Not you criticize yourself, you expect yourself to be perfect, and we wouldn't expect anyone to be perfect, because it's so challenging. The emotions that you feel will skew how you respond, and you're not going to be perfect all the time, and we'd never expect anyone to be. It's really difficult.
Thank you for that. I know many people. I've made friends with other relatives in the care home. I think one of them might be coming onto the show in the future. You do feel guilty, and it's not your fault. But as human beings, we feel so powerless. Now, with regard to powerless, people always say, but if you take certain pills early, you can delay this. Paul, is that true?
Well, for some people, it might be true, and slightly, and there might be a beneficial effect, depending on what type of dementia you have. I think that's the key thing. So the only sort of medications really that are licensed for Alzheimer's disease. So for some of the other dementias, like vascular dementias, we don't have any particular treatment medications for that. And most of them are licensed for what you might call people in their sort of early diagnosis, rather than later on. Where one or two may well be more useful into kind of more moderate stages of dementia, but they don't work for everybody. They may well prevent and help people to cope for longer for a certain number of people. They do come with side effects, which need to be really closely monitored.
So what might they be, Paul?
Well, a lot of people report sort of upset stomachs and diarrhea and things like that, rashes, all sorts of things that are not uncommon actually with this type of medication. But I suppose that I think for me, the decisions are very individual ones for families and people with dementia. So if some of those medications for Alzheimer's disease work for a period of time, keep people at a certain level of ability to cope, being able to live their lives in a slightly deteriorated but a stable way, then that's fine. But there's often a point where they stop working after time, and that's the point where families and people with dementia get really despairing about it. Actually, they find it really difficult. And of course, if those medications are stopped, then we tend to see sometimes more of a decline in some people. So they don't work for everybody. It's really essential, though, that people get the right diagnosis, because if they do get the right diagnosis, and there are some of these options available for people, then they should have access to them if they want them. So the problem we've got at the moment is even getting a diagnosis is really tricky.
It is on both ways. And Paul, can I just raise this with you? The person that you love, that you can see is being affected, is in denial. The last thing you want to say to yourself is, I've got dementia, I've got Alzheimer's, my life. Oh, for heavens. So we would take, my partner and I, we would take my mum to the memory clinic to start with. Well, of course, she was great at faking it. And then, I can see you're both smiling. And so this is obviously a common thing. And I had to virtually drag Mum to these things. There's nothing wrong with me. Why are you making and she got really shirty with me. I felt guilty that I'm dragging her off to a memory clinic and putting her through this. But I felt it was essential because something was clearly, I couldn't just stand on the sidelines and just let this happen. But you've got the additional problem of not only being able to see the right people because of waiting lists and everything else, but the person that you want to take there is very resistant. It's a real double whammy.
It's a real challenge when you're supporting someone who doesn't want to engage in an assessment. I think I'd certainly always say to family members, to carers, if you can, speak to the professionals on your own. So have a telephone conversation with those professionals without your relative being sat there, so that you can be really open and honest about how things are, the history, how they progressed.
Forgive me for laughing. Can I tell you? I'll tell you why I'm laughing. Because I said, Mum, I'm just going to pop back in. What did you say to him? And she gave me the absolute sort of KGB third degree. And, that's why I'm smiling.
I would say
everything you're saying is resonating so hard.
Just do it, not when you go for the appointment. Ask for a separate call at another time. So that you have an opportunity just to share honestly how things are without upsetting your relative. I mean, obviously you don't want to go behind their back, but sometimes it's about actually making almost like a best interest decisions about the care and support that your loved one needs. And it might be that it's essential that the professionals hear the reality of how challenging it is. But it's not unusual to hear family members say, my mum, my dad was on their best behaviour. They scored really highly in the tests. And they're saying everything's all right. They cooked dinner and I make dinner.
It is. They become the greatest actors I've ever seen. They're worthy of Oscars. I used to come out and go, how did she pull that off?
And I think it goes back to what you mentioned earlier, Paul, about stigma and how we need to challenge the stigma around dementia. And if we understand it more, it's not so frightening, and that's for us, our age group and all age groups, actually. It's really important that we understand dementia so that we can, challenge those fears.
Let me get back to medication briefly, if I may. I don't want to drill down too hard on it. Obviously, there are approved drugs that may or may not. Obviously, there's caveats with all of them, as there are with any pharmaceutical, but I get that. Are they developing stuff which is remedies, anything that can postpone this? Are they developing stuff that has yet not been approved by NICE?
So I'll probably take this question.
Jules looks relieved, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few problems. The first problem is we have not spent hardly or anywhere near enough money on cure and treatment research, and there is
I know.
it is scandalous, really, when we think of the size of the issue that we've got. If this was cancer care, we'd be spending the billions that we really need to
Precisely.
spend on that. So that's the first thing to say. And there are, always new discoveries happening, but it takes so long to get that scientific discovery into some kind of research and then into some kind of treatment. So we are behind in future treatments. And there, we've had trials of different things that have kind of failed and not worked, but all of that research teaches us something that we then build on for future treatments. The problem is we don't escalate that research as much as we should globally, actually, but particularly in the UK, which is why a lot of other organisations like Alzheimer's Research UK are really trying to hold the government's feet to the fire on research funding, because this is a massive global problem. It's not just a problem in the UK, and our treatments that we've got are over 20 years old, and there's nothing terribly new. I mean, there are ideas and there are opportunities, but to take that seed idea and research and then turn it into some kind of curative treatment, that takes years, and we are behind.
Wow. So we're 20 years behind the curve.
Yeah, well, we've got so in America there's a new medication that has just been approved by the FDA, which is their regulator. It's not been approved in the UK, but even the efficacy of that drug and how effective it is not, the case isn't really made yet. But if it was made, that would be the newest one we've had for over 20 years. So that just goes to show you that only one tentatively has got through one regulator's approval in 20 years. So we are so behind in terms of treatments, medication, curative type.
This is a shocking thing to say. Please don't think badly of me, but sometimes it gets to the point you say, well, let's just try this procedure because it can't get any worse. And you might think, well, that's just cruel. I don't think it is, because sometimes it's about quality of life as well, isn't it? You just want your loved one to have a quality of life, and whatever state their mind is in, to be happy.
Yeah, and I think that's where care comes into it then.
Yes.
So how we care, our interventions that we use, whether that's more arts-based interventions or talking-based interventions or kind of other therapeutic-based interventions. And all of our interventions, for example, are about restoring the human being living with dementia. So the things that kind of uplift people, the things that
beautifully
engage with the world. And that's what matters. And that's what really matters in terms of quality of life as well. So so whatever our scientists do, and we hope they get the investments they need, what you are left with is how to care for somebody and how to support somebody and how to give and afford a certain level of humanity to the person with dementia that may well be taken away as dementia advances.
So interesting you say that. One day, I hope this is apposite, and all the people who were caring for my mother were brilliant. I had to move her 4 times because financially it was crippling, which is a whole other issue.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone who cared for her was magnificent. I have nothing but praise for every single. Their patience, their dedication was outstanding. But I wanted them to see not this kind of shriveled old woman, but I wanted them to see the mom that I remembered and knew. And so one day I took in a blow-up photo of mom in her prime. And they said, oh, what a gorgeous woman. Who's that? I said, that is the lady over there. And although they were already being fantastic, their attitude went up another notch because they realized, A, what I was and the family were going through, my partner and my daughter were going through, seeing someone so changed. But B, they could see that was who was inside there, sort of trapped, And it was a simple thing to do, but it seemed to be, jolly effective.
You're absolutely right. It's so important to understand who the person is. they may not be able to communicate that themselves, but as a family, if you can share the history of your mum, of your dad, of your loved one to the people who are supporting and caring, it can make such a difference. One of the stories I think back to quite frequently, actually, when I worked in an acute hospital, we had a gentleman came in with no family, no relatives.
Oh.
All we knew was where he was born, and he was born in the West Indies, and we knew what island he was born on, and we knew roughly when he left that island to come to the UK. So what we did was we Googled the island and pictures from that era, and we printed them off and we put them in a book, and we gave him the book, and it brought him to life because he talked about home, he talked about his family, and because there were pictures, the staff would look at the pictures with him and talk to him about his life, his family, his trip to the UK. So we found out so much about him just by doing something that's relatively simple and obviously didn't cost very much at all. But the human costs and the emotional cost to his care, it just changed everything for him. It was brilliant. It's a story I fondly reflect on. It was just lovely.
I got to tell you, that's almost making me break up. That's getting me very close to breaking up there. That is it's just a little bit of lateral thinking, I guess. Because as you said, that's an inexpensive, what do you got, a bit of ink from the printer, it's like taking, frankly, you're doing a few photos. And the difference it makes is monumental. What a fabulous thing. Was that your idea?
It was one of my colleagues, actually. She was working with him, but
what a beautiful
I
thing
saw
to
him
do.
discharged, and as he was being discharged, he was going to a care home. Actually, he had his book like that. He was holding it, not letting that go, taking that with me, and that. It was brilliant.
You know
Absolutely
what, guys? Sometimes it's really hard. You're trying to be the professional broadcaster, and sometimes it gets straight into your heart and soul. You think, no, keep it going. Gotta keep it together. That's such a beautiful image, though, isn't it? It's such a beautiful image. Where do you, Jules, get your capacity? I know this is probably a question you've not been asked, but it's all about interpersonal stuff. It would keep you on. I like to keep things on a very human level. Where do you get your capacity for being so caring from? How do you have this incredible reservoir, this well? And the same for you, Paul, as well.
I think, the reason I became a nurse was because it was a personal reason, actually. I'd never even thought about becoming a nurse, but my dad died when I was quite young, and the nurses were incredible. And it changed my whole future because I decided I wanted to be a nurse. And the reason why they were incredible is because they supported us as a family. It wasn't just about my dad becoming ill very quickly. They were there for us as a whole family. They wanted to understand my dad, and they wanted to understand us as a family, and they were amazing. And when I became a nurse, I think I have an innate nature of being incredibly nosy. And I think it really helps, actually, when you want to be a dementia nurse, because you find out things about people, and then you can use that information to make their life with dementia so much better. And you can work with their family as well to help them understand how they can support their loved one to make their life better. And that's where it comes from. And, the story I just mentioned earlier about the gentleman in hospital, it's one of those wow moments,
Yes.
a real breakthrough. And you could see the staff as well, just thinking that's such an easy thing to do. And you'll know that they're going to do that for the rest of their career. And it's just that's what keeps me going.
Have you been, I dread to mention this, have staffing levels and the ability to offer all the help been affected very adversely by COVID? So you're both nodding there, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID has hit people with dementia and their families the hardest. Not just in mortality, but in how people have been living their lives. Services have been reduced. Our workforce in dementia care was already under pressure. not just in our nurses, but also in our social care professional workforce, within hospitals. So it was already stretched. And what we've seen is, certainly with our own Aboriginal nurse communities who have been operating all the way through the pandemic, when other services have kind of had to shut down and been decreased, we've seen them go over and above, which is really heartwarming. It makes me feel great as director of clinical services. But we see them really tired. We see them, really desperate, trying to fix things that are just not there anymore. So there's lack of respite facilities, lack of social care, lack of groups, and all the rest of it. And what I've seen certainly in the community, in the Aboriginal nurse community, is that real difficult dilemma of not being able to give the care that you want to give, the standards of care that you want to give, because those things just aren't around. And that's led to a lot of nurses feeling quite emotional, having difficult issues and stuff. What we have done is obviously try and support and help and give people like Jules and the rest of our teams, trying to work with them, hold their hands, put our arms around them, but also try and keep that energy and that motivation going. Because if we don't provide that kind of level of care, then at the moment through COVID, there's not a lot of services. They're starting to get back into place now, of course, slowly. And that's from a backdrop of actually the services weren't that great in the first place. They were very patchy, very disparate, and it was really hard to navigate if you're a family or a person with dementia to try and get to the right care. So they weren't perfect before COVID, but the impact of COVID, I think, both on people with dementia, their families and their loved ones, and also our staff, nursing staff and social care staff and wider healthcare professionals has been really astronomical. And I suppose the thing I worry about is what we get when we're going into winter, we're going into challenging times.
Precisely.
So how do we keep looking after each other? How do we keep looking after our professionals? And that's certainly what's on my mind at the moment. What else do we need to do to keep people providing service?
Totally. There's two huge issues here. One is, and I know you might think this is brutal, I thanked whatever powers there may be that my mum had gone before COVID, because the thought of not being able to properly see her for sort of 18 months, 2 years, or looking through a window is so pathetic in the true sense of the word. It's so awful. It was just horrible. And the other thing is, we've had many guests on who are there to support the nursing staff with brilliant initiatives, because we always assume that they're immortal. We assume that we're all suffering and they're somehow from another planet and everything's great. They're just like us. But instead of being bus drivers or working in a supermarket, they're nurses, but they're still not getting the respite. They could be accountants, whatever it is. It's very, very hard. I don't think we've touched the sides on this, to be honest with you. I think we need to not just care for the patients, but we've got to care for all the nursing staff across the board. Because another brutal winter, I don't know what you think, Jules, but another brutal winter is going to be rough in every single way imaginable.
Absolutely. I think our nurses are preparing themselves really at the moment. And I guess the major thing that we do as a charity in terms of supporting our Aboriginal nurses is we have a really robust supervision support network, and we support our nurses to come together once a month, and they talk through just some of the issues you've just raised actually about COVID. It's very commonly spoken about, and through that supervision, when the nurses come together, it allows them to support each other, and they also have support from the facilitator. We've got a robust practice development support network as well, and we commonly talk about these issues so we can support the nurses and let them know that we understand what they're going through and how we can support them as well.
Because they have their own lives. They don't just exist in this sort of bubble within the four walls of whatever the facility might be. They actually go home and have family members and have three-dimensional lives. And people just, somehow it's human nature, just don't take that into account very often, you know?
And you know, not forgetting that our nurses may also have caring roles themselves, not just for children, but also for, you know, parents, husbands, wives, etc. So as you say, we're all human, and caring roles are going on for our nurses as well.
Let's just get down to a little bit. I hope you're all right for time. You've been just fantastic guests. Thank you so much on such a very important issue. If somebody starts to see some indication in a family member that, let's just say, something isn't right, you know, mum's changing or something, what's the first most practical thing they can do?
Shall I answer this? I mean, I'd probably suggest have a conversation with your relative about whether they've noticed any changes. Not everyone will appreciate those changes or be aware of them, but surprisingly, you might find that your relative will engage with you and say, well, actually, yeah, I have noticed a few things have been a bit strange. Right. The next thing to do is make an appointment with a GP, which I know can be tremendously difficult at the moment. But it is important that even if you do have to wait a wee while, it's important to get that appointment, and it might be initially a telephone consultation just to discuss the changes that you've noticed. And it might be that you'd want to, if it's you that thinks you have dementia, write down what you think has changed. And if your relative's supporting you, they can also write down what they've noticed. Right. So you've got a history of what's happened, and you can have that discussion with the GP or the practice nurse. The next step usually would be some blood tests. And those blood tests will show if there's anything physical in the body that's happening that might cause that cognitive impairment. So common things that they test for are infections. Right. Things like thyroid function, just to make sure that your thyroid's working okay. Certain vitamins they check for as well, because if there's any kind of disparity in levels, they can work to kind of bring them back to normal. So they might prescribe something like thyroxine if you've got a thyroid problem, or they might prescribe certain vitamins. The other thing that they usually look for as well is whether someone is feeling depressed or low in mood. Particularly as you get older, the symptoms of depression are very similar to dementia. So forgetfulness, for example, and that's because with depression, your motivation can be affected. So your motivation to remember something means, you know, it's just not there. So you won't remember something. So the GP will probably screen for depression. And if there's any indication, again, that there is depression, then what they do in the first instance is prescribe some antidepressants. And then if that works and someone's cognition returns to normal, it's probably the depression. So it's about ruling things out. Right. Depending on your age, if you're a younger person, if you're a younger woman, you've probably seen in the press recently, there's been a lot of talk around perimenopause and menopause. Yep. So I would say it's really important, if you are of that age, that the GP discusses whether you're perimenopause or menopausal, and considers HRT. Obviously, that's something to discuss with the GP, because if you are a woman of that age, you can experience brain fog, so memory problems, etc., that may feel a bit like dementia. I've had people say to me, I feel like I've got dementia, and it most likely is menopause, perimenopause. So it's important to get the treatment for that. If all of these things have then been ruled out, the GP is likely to do a screen, a local kind of very simple test to see whether there's any indication of cognitive impairment. And if they see that, they're then likely to refer you on to your local cognitive service. They're mostly called memory services.
Yes, memory
services. As we know and discussed, dementia is not necessarily all about memory, but we have memory services, so there we are. But that would be the next step. You'd be referred to your memory service, and as Paul was saying, there is a bit of a waiting list to be seen, and that's variable as to where you live.
Paul, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Jules. Paul, I'm going to ask you the hard question now. That
I'm not worried. Go for it.
That what Jules has described is if you're getting cooperation from that person. Just to bring my mum, I can only speak from unfortunate personal experience. I wish I didn't have any, but I do. Don't be ridiculous. I'd get really annoyed at the thought that there was anything wrong. What do you do then when that person that you care for is unwilling to work with you?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I had it with my mum as well, and she absolutely refused to go to the GP. There's nothing wrong with her; she was absolutely fine. What are you talking about? All the stories. Yeah. So what I did was I wrote to my GP. I sent him an email because I couldn't get through on the phone, and I explained the situation that was going on. This was about 6 years ago now. And I explained the situation, and I said to them, look, and my mum was on medications for other things. So in their regular checks, I wanted the GP to be aware of the things that myself and my father and my sister were experiencing with her. And what that led to was the next time she went to the doctors to see about something else, the GP had that on file and then was able to start that conversation. Of course, she trusted the GP. She did whatever the GP wanted.
Of course. I mean, what the hell do you know? You're only Director of Clinical Services at Dementia UK.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's an irrelevance. But I think the point is to keep a dialogue with those people who can actually do something about it. Because she listened to the doctors. She always listened to the nurses in the hospital when she'd been in hospital.
Yeah.
So what that led to was ultimately myself having to fill in a few forms with the GP so that I could talk to the GP directly about what I was experiencing with her separately. And I think people don't realise that when they're carers, they particularly if they're sons and daughters, they can fill out a form, get the person to sign it, like your mum or your dad to sign it, so that the doctor can actually speak to you, and then you get to give your experience over, so that the doctor, GP, can make an assessment of your parent, and then they've got that in your mind. So it's not you don't get into the battle, the kind of come with me, no, I'm not coming.
Yes, I do.
Actually, you get to really talk about the kind of problems that you're experiencing and the questions you've got, and the GP is much better informed as a result, in which case they can have a much more useful conversation when the person.
And it's neutral ground, isn't it?
It is.
You're not sitting in someone's bed. You're not sitting in someone's lounge, living room or bedroom. It's neutral ground, and they're much more willing to engage. That's brilliant advice, Paul. That's why you get the big bucks. Now, speaking of which, tell us a bit more. How can we all support Dementia UK, just as we wind up to the top of the show? How do we do that?
Well, the Dementia UK is a national charity. If you go on our webpage, as you can see, there's so many ways to get engaged with us. We are wholly dependent on people funding us from donations. So there's no government funding in this. This is like all the money we get, we put into nurses to go on the ground. And
Thank you.
I think so. Go onto our website, have a look at what we're up to. There's always kind of events and things going on that you can join in with. I think also some people, instead of wanting to donate money, they want to help us in other ways. So they want to campaign for us, or they want to talk to their MP about why they haven't got a specialist nurse on the ground and things like that. And all of that advice is there on the website of how to do that. We're blessed with some amazing supporters at our charity who go over and above for us, and we can't do what we do. And our ambition is to get, more and more nurses on the ground, as Jules was talking about, to provide that really important support. And I think people are really committed to the cause. They give us money, they help campaign for us. So first place, go to the website, dementiauk.org, have a look on there. We've got a fantastic, brilliant fundraising team of really energetic, passionate people. About 80% of people who work in our charity have had some experience of dementia in their families.
Listen,
it resonates with them.
Thank you. You have both been absolutely extraordinary. All I'd like you, my final comment, to know that whatever we can do as an organization, we are there for you. We will support you 100%. You have all our details. You've got my personal details. Just reach out and we will always be there for you. So Jules Knight, Paul Edwards, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We'll be back on Friday at 11 a.m. Until then, stay safe. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Take good care of yourselves. Bye.
Bye.